Thanks so much for tuning in to Reversing Climate Change. I'm the host, Ross Kenyon. We have two sponsors right now, Rainbow and Philip Lee LLP. If you give me a couple minutes, I'll tell you about why they are very relevant to your interests. So listen up. If you follow me on Substack or LinkedIn, you've probably seen me write for Rainbow recently. They have a very idiosyncratic approach to how science is commercialized and how engineering works within carbon removal. And I really like working with them. I've learned a lot from the people there. They're very smart, thoughtful people, and they're aiming to be the most developer-centric registry out there. What's cool about Rainbow is how seriously they take field engineering experience. They aren't there just to write a bunch of detached rules about how things should work in the abstract and then let project developers figure it out. No, they are very serious about field engineering, about how operations actually work in the real world, and they take a rigorous yet philosophical approach. I'll link to those articles in the show notes in the sponsors section. You should check them out because it will give you a very good idea of why I think Rainbow is a very cool company and one that you should consider doing business with. If you are a project developer and you're thinking about which registry to use for your next project, you should absolutely take a meeting with Rainbow and see if there's a fit there. One thing to keep in mind that is often very important to the project developers that I've interviewed as a result of my work with Rainbow, doing customer discovery work, and just trying to wrap my head around the opportunities that they're seeing is how fast their certification process is. They typically quote around 3 months to issue carbon credits, which is very short. It goes by lickety-split for registries. So if you're a project developer, you're looking for a registry to use to certify and issue your carbon credits, take a look at Rainbow. Link is in the show notes. Thanks so much for listening. And I'd also love to tell you about Philip Lee LLP. I really like doing shows about the law. I think the law is such a fascinating part of our shared social life. It structures so much of it. It's badly understood by most people. And just structuring deals within carbon removal is hard. I'm talking grown-up deals here. Like when you're trying to put together an enormous package, complicated structuring, a lot of money changing hands, the stakes are high. You really do need a good lawyer. I'm sorry to tell you that if you are a startup out there in carbon removal, you're going to probably pay a fair amount of money to lawyers. There's just no way around it. Your choice is basically, do you get a bad lawyer or a good lawyer? One really cool thing I can say on Philip Lee LLP's behalf, well, one, Ryan Covington and I did a very fun show about how basically no one except for an elite few really know what bankability and project finance even mean. And he lays it out very clearly. If you'd like to go listen to that show, it's awesome and it's linked in the show notes. And also we end up talking about Ernest Hemingway a fair amount too. So it keeps with the tradition of reversing climate change. One also really cool thing is that they just won Environmental Finance's VCM Law Firm of the Year. They've won it 3 years in a row, 2023, 2024, and 2025. It's the only award for legal teams operating in the VCM, and they have offices in the US, Europe, and the UK. You should check out Philip Lee LLP. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening to this, and thank you to our sponsors. You really make this so that it's something that in a busy life with lots of competing priorities, I'm able to keep coming back and making more reversing climate change. Thanks so much for what you do. And now, here is the show. Hey, thank you so much for listening to Reversing Climate Change. This is the host, Ross Kenyon. I'm a carbon removal entrepreneur. Before I tell you about the guest, if you could please open up your podcast app. You probably haven't even closed it yet. Give the show 5 stars on Spotify, 5 stars and a review on Apple Podcasts. That would be so helpful. For $5 a month, you can also get rid of all the ads that I don't read myself. Link is in the show notes if you'd like to do that. Thanks so much for listening. And now I'm going to tell you about today's guest. Omar Sadoon is the Director of Strategic Partnerships at Planetary. Planetary is an ocean alkalinity enhancement company. And today, Omar tells me about the challenges of finding alkalinity in the right places to remove carbon from the atmosphere and the ocean, putting it in the right place, how to get it where it's going so that alkalinity-based carbon removal can take place. One way of thinking about climate change is essentially a problem of pH. Climate change and carbon dioxide is making the ocean increasingly acidic. And so mixing in basic materials can have the benefit of reducing ocean acidification and removing carbon. I hope you enjoy. Here's the show now. Thanks for being here, Omar.
Thanks, Ross. Glad to be here.
Omar, is all of carbon removal just about alkalinity? I've been saying this lately. It's not always true, but it's often true. How much of carbon removal is just the same people running around many of the same places on the planet trying to find alkalinity?
Um, I would say I don't know that carbon removal is all about alkalinity, but I would frame it as there's a point where you can view climate change as an acid-based problem. You've got too much acid in one location, and you need a lot of base to cancel it out or move it where it is. So it's not a completely bad framing. I think it's some people will definitely view it that way. I think I'm in that group.
The pH framing, anything that's weathering related is alkalinity. There's parts of direct air capture that are alkalinity swings and also manipulate pH, trying to get us to negativity. It seems like a lot of this is where's the rock getting spread and why and where's it going, but it's mostly about moving alkalinity around, at least for several of the major pathways in carbon removal.
I think one good way to like back up and think about it too is like this is the way the Earth would naturally do it if we weren't around. So that's why I think it's not a bad framing to use, because absent human interventions, it would just take a long time. But yes, those rocks would weather, that alkalinity would react with what's in the atmosphere, and eventually you cancel out a lot of that acid that we put in the atmosphere. So I think there's truth to that.
You spent about 5 years in carbon removal. We've known each other for a fairly long time here. How much of your working life has been chasing down alkalinity and making sure it doesn't break the LCA to get it to where it needs to be?
It's been at least the last 4 years. Being really diligent about like what are the sources of alkalinity we can use, where do they exist in an abundant enough form that it's worthwhile to pursue them, and to do all this contracting and supply chain and figuring out how to get it there efficiently, and then backtracking to make sure that we're not having upstream effects, or we're changing the way that operations may act that could force us as a company to start having to take account for those emissions. So thinking about those upstream effects we have when we make a purchase, and finding it and qualifying it has been a long road. It's been at least the last 4 years.
I know people are sometimes reticent to share too much about where they source alkalinity from. I know there's competitive and trade secret reasons for being close to the vest on that, and would not want to ask you to disclose any of that. But I am hoping we can talk about some general principles here about how to think about alkalinity, where people are looking for it. Why is this so hard to get right? I hear my friends who work in alkalinity-based carbon removal gripe about it sometimes, about how difficult it is to find it, move it, and make sure the chemistry is even the right fit for their application. And sometimes you'll get one part of that is totally perfect, and one part that will totally kill a source that you would otherwise be dreaming about as this thing that you were so looking forward to, and then it just broke everything. But please tell me, like, how accurate is that?
What I'd say is that it's, alkalinity broadly it's abundantly available all around the planet. There's all kinds of it in different forms. There's, calcium, magnesium are the two primaries that we look for and utilize in Planetary's process. But finding sources that don't break the LCA and the economics of the project is sort of the secret sauce, and also don't do any damage or harm to the spaces where we utilize it. So in sort of, broad terms, the way to go about that is to determine, what's the relationship between your alkalinity source and your host site, where you plan to use it. How do you plan to move that stuff in a way, and what are the efficiencies of the different transport methods? You really got to think about how was it produced in the first place? What was the intended use case? If you're going after a primary source, what kind of energy goes into producing that stuff? If similar to Planetary, you start to look at byproducts and other non-intended products, you really want to test for anything else that could be in them. So there's there's a lot of ways you need to ensure that what you're doing is first and foremost safe for the ocean to be utilized. And then you want to think about the economics and scale. Is this a one-time or one-stop shop where this is all that's left and this pile only exists for a limited time, or is this something that's ongoing that supports the project for decades onwards?
When you're approaching this, sounds like an enormous calculation with so many different variables. Where do you even start to make sense of, does this source of alkalinity make sense for me or not?
My approach is to look at the volume of alkalinity that we're talking about. So before you start investing hundreds of thousands of dollars into testing these sources, you really want to ensure like there's enough there to make it worthwhile, because that testing process is not just expensive, but it's long. And so you probably want to start there. It's just, is this worthwhile to even start the investigation? Yeah.
Assuming that it is a sufficient quantity to make it worth your while, what's the flow of how you invalidate a source? And how do you do that as early as possible? It would be terrible to go through quite a lot of this and find out that there's enough heavy metal in the rock that you're just like, cool, this is actually a contaminant and is above safe or legal or ethical limits or something like that. Like, you probably want to know that pretty quickly, right?
You want to know quickly, and that's where you need to have some sort of like set of criteria for how the host site's permitted. At the same time as you're looking at things like what are the transport chains that exist and what's going to be a new infrastructure that you need to build out. So if you start getting into sources that are a really far away distance from the ocean, it's not always going to be worth it, even if you can build a relatively efficient supply chain. Just because if you can overcome the initial cost of the transport, you still have to overcome then the energy you spend doing it. So then you get into LCA and TEA calculations. So that's probably like the next step after you can ensure that there's no heavy metals that would rule it out. In Planetary's process, we're also looking at things like ocean efficiency. So how much carbon does it actually uptake? It is, you're right, a really big calculation to make. And it takes, a lot of people on the team to ensure that we're doing it in a way that we're not over-investing, but at the same time, we're not rolling things out too early that have potential. Because it's probably one of the single biggest and most important decisions that we'll make as a company is like, what's the source, and then where do we want to go invest into putting it, and how do we ensure that that's safe and economic?
Tell me more about ocean efficiency. Are there certain sites where this is super powered and some places that render it impotent?
So there are definitely regions of the world, and this is more the expertise of the ocean science team. They basically try to determine where is it most efficient to add that alkalinity. So the things you're looking for typically are like a really good mixing zone where you're getting a lot of circulation of water, so it's not stagnant areas. You're looking for a particular depth. Those areas will determine basically on a percentage basis where's the most efficient to do that addition. So it's this interplay between, okay, we don't want to go too far away from our alkalinity source because then you're racking up those costs of transport, but you don't want to lose a lot of points on the back end ocean efficiency. So it's a conversation between the teams to make up where is the best place to do an addition.
When you're working through the LCA, TEA dynamics here and trying to figure out how do you maximize your net removals calculation to make sure that you're not just losing removals you could otherwise sell due to emissions that are built into moving alkalinity around, are there things you can do that change that equation besides selection of site and source? Are there improvements that you have to game out, like the capital expenditure of building a spur line on a railroad that brings it closer to the source? Are there things that you can do that change that, or do you kind of have to take the world as given?
No, there's definitely, there are levers you can pull on. So it's, in some cases, it's changing aspects of the alkalinity, whether it's through things like leaching technology or changes to particle size. You can change the material efficiency With ocean efficiency, you're probably more stuck with what you get. Like once you select a site, you can reduce the uncertainty over time by the gathering samples and a lot of the work that that ocean sciences team does to go ensure that what we're seeing in the model is confirmed by what we're seeing, on the ground or in the ocean. That changes the uncertainty bounds on any of our verification work. And then, at the plant level, to a degree, you're stuck with what you have. You're not going to change the operations of a power generation plant or a wastewater treatment plant or, any of the places where we look for outfalls. To a degree, we can, take up some land, maybe make changes to the site to some point. But those are probably the areas in which we try to pull levers.
Yeah, it seems like it's mostly around, can you alter the material that's going into ocean more so than fix geographical issues or high capex issues.
Yeah, and I mean those are the conversations we're getting into now as we scale up, right? Like where is the point to make those investments? When do we build a rail spur and when do we start to do more?
Dang, that sounds fun. Are you working on that too?
I'm part of a team that works on it. So there's a lot of smart people in the team. And then, I add my little LCA piece in. But yeah, we definitely talk through it quite a bit.
Are you able to speak generally about some of the projects that one might consider for doing this in alkalinity broadly?
Yes, I mean, probably the best example is just what we're the first.
It's like the rail spur that is actually it.
Yeah, so that's part of what we're evaluating for the next evolution of the Tufts Cove project. So, for those folks that are interested, I think one of the best places to go to dig into some of these things is the isometric website, where all of our verified credits kind of live, or the verification steps we took, and the specifics about how that project is performing. I encourage anyone to go, look at those documents and get an idea of what goes into the credit generation for Tufts Cove and Planetary. When it comes to new projects or evolutions of the Tufts Cove project, it really is about scaling up our capacity to efficiently move that alkalinity and the sources we look for being more abundant and available. And so that's where things like rail spurs come into play. Is like, how do we cut down on the number of trucks we're moving? How do we cut down on these big ocean transport steps that we have to take today? Railways are really efficient relative to some other transport methods, and so if you can move a lot more bulk and over larger distances without as many emissions or costs, it starts to make a lot of sense for the project to grow.
Is there any place in the world that's parallel to the guano trade that you could just like bring a tanker up, load some equivalent of bird is there like a cliffside you could just mine and throw a bunch of alkaline rocks into a barge and then stick it right off of Peru, and then you have like a nice upwelling zone and something like that could just take place? Does that get it in the Humboldt zone over there, you're done? Does that exist anywhere?
If somebody knows about it, where there's basically a giant pile of alkalinity sitting beside the ocean and it's already pre-permitted and it's super clean, and you call me up. I'd love to know. I haven't found the Goldilocks setup yet. And I didn't even know that existed for guano, but
it used to, and then they mined it all, and it was a pretty destructive process. Actually, that framing is probably not the best framing for OAE, I think, because
I think it's the opposite direction of what the story we want to tell about OAE.
So, yeah. Pull up to either a remote island that has a bunch of beautiful pelagic species in like Galapagos or wherever, or on the coastal Peru, and you just like carve up a cliff and dump it in the ocean. It also sounds politically unpopular. I said it in a very cavalier way, but yeah, that sounds so okay. Your experience with community engagement leads you to believe this would be a tremendous failure, and you don't want to work on that.
Not just community engagement, my love for all things ocean and safety and that environmental streak in me just says, let's not do that.
Let's not do that. Are you able to talk much about the Cornwall experience, the St. Ives experience?
I mean, to the degree that I can, because I never actually spent any time personally in Cornwall. And there's a lot of, really hardworking team members that did help get that first dosing project off the ground. But, broadly speaking, it demonstrated that OEE could be measured, that you could really see a signal. That project was funded by BEIS, the business industrial portion of the UK government. And, we worked very closely with the wastewater treatment facility, and, we worked very closely with an alkalinity partner to ensure that what we were adding was something that's traditionally been added to wastewater treatment. So it was nothing new. It was something that very familiar and very safe and certified to be done that way. And there was some portion of the community that was very excited about that wanted to see that project exist. And then there was a portion as well that spoke out very loudly against what we were doing and went against their values. Ultimately, the reason that project didn't go forward was because of everything we just talked about, that the alkalinity sources that we were looking for were just too far away and too expensive and didn't make a lot of economic sense for us to move forward. So it's something that the results of that work we're very proud of. It's published work through Plymouth Marine Labs, but the community experience certainly was something that we took on board very seriously, because at the time we needed to do a better job of community engagement and working with the community to make sure it's something that they wanted to. That we've taken that forward in not just Tufts Cove, but any project we do in the future.
Do you have any advice you could share with people for how to best manage the community experience, the engagement, just making sure that there's enough buy-in locally that this is a project that they desire and maybe not merely tolerate, let alone oppose?
My advice would be start early and do it often. And we have a wonderful team now, led by Diana Phillips at Planetary, who really has a structure and a framework for how you engage the community. And they've done a number of Indigenous engagements. They've done a number of efforts in wherever we've deployed or tested, whether it's in the US, in Canada, in Europe, that make an effort to listen. Like, it really begins with listening, because there's so much local knowledge about that local ocean area that you want to take on board before you start talking about how you're going to, play with the chemistry of that area. So I would really just kind of defer to Diana's knowledge, because we've had much better success with her on board and with her approach, which is collaborative first and foremost.
Are you sick of people saying that OAE is antacid for the earth?
I think it's like, I heard someone say, you guys should just name the company Hydroxy Dump.
Hydroxy Dump? Is this like a Canadian medicine that I'm missing the connection to?
No, it was just like a casual way of saying, like, oh, that's what you're doing. You're adding hydroxides to the ocean. So similar to the bad guano thing. And I was like, if that's what makes sense for you.
I thought this was maybe like, oh yeah, everyone has milk in a bag. Everyone knows hydroxy. Yeah, that's what you have that, right? It's in your pharmacy.
Ketchup chips,
yeah.
milk in a bag, Marties, all those things.
Yeah, go out for a rip and all that. Cool.
And I think, I've heard people tell me that all I do is drop bass.
Now, see, that one I like. I am very supportive of that.
Oh.
Do you think, I don't know, a lot of the brands in carbon removal, though, don't have enough, I don't think they could survive a lot of humor. Like, whenever we're doing memes, sometimes we even think, like, I don't think this company has a sense of humor. I think if we made a joke about it, they're not going to respond and play along with it and be like, haha, we are honored by this. Instead, they might be like, what the hell do we do with this? We just got made into some meme we don't understand.
No, I say go for it. If you want to rip on Planetary once in a while, I'm sure we could take it, and there's a good sense of humor in the company, whether it's dropping the base or dropping the guano or dropping the hydroxy dump.
Challenge accepted. I'll have to think about that. Yeah, I don't know that we've done that many ocean alkalinity enhancement memes. What do you think is funny about your space? Is there anything that you think is a recurring issue or something that if it was referenced, your peers and different OE companies would recognize?
I think the peers would probably say, like, the confusion between the biological and chemical pathways. There's like, oh, we don't know what's going to happen if you add stuff to the ocean. And there's a lot of things get mixed up in reports. I don't know if this is much as just like a gripe that I hear pretty often of, confusing the biological pathways that you're growing seaweed and the risks around that with the, chemical pathways like planetaries where, we're changing the pH and canceling out carbonic acid in the ocean. Different set of risks than what you'd see in those, seaweed growing pathways. So a lot of stuff tends to clump us together. And that's where I hear especially our ocean sciences team start to get frustrated because they're different approaches.
Okay, the first meme I thought of for this would be, do you know the one of Pam from The Office where it's the corporate needs you to find the difference between these two pictures and it's the same picture?
Yeah.
So I would just do like one that's like biology and the other one's like ocean chemistry and be like how to drive an OAE professional. Insane. I think that's where my head goes first. You think they'd get a joke like that?
Yeah, I think they would. But I don't know. What are other funny things about our space? I have to think about that one. But if you come up with any, pass them my way.
We had the meme lab earlier today, and I was trying to think of funny ways to communicate this. Like, well, it's all alkalinity, and I don't know if this part will make it into the show, but I had one that was like, the brain that comes out of the guy and it goes all the way around. He's like sitting on his giant brain.
I don't know that one.
It was like me lecturing Jen Wilcox after 4.5 espresso martinis about how it's all alkalinity or something like that. I love the idea of just like being drunk at a conference and lecturing someone who knows way better than I do about something like this.
Yeah.
You're not laughing. That's a bad sign. That's not a good meme.
The one that did make us laugh was like this experience that we had. I think it was a buyer event, and someone on our team basically was talking to one of these big buyers, and then as soon as the word models came up, it was the same effect of like being friend zoned. Of like, oh, you guys use models. Okay.
I thought for ocean stuff, models are fairly supported because I followed the discussions around bicarbs work and the desire for direct measurement rather than modeling in ocean spaces. And it ruffled a lot of feathers. And I saw people pushing back and saying that ocean models are basically the way to go. And I come from soil and we've all been traumatized by models to some extent. And so like everyone was pushing towards direct measurement, even though it's expensive and the costs are coming down. But it was funny to see that kind of inverted for oceans. But where are the fault lines for that right now? Is it mirror image to soil in that way, or is something else happening?
I'm not as familiar with soil, but like what I can say is like there's multiple levels of this. There's the models really just contain some degree of uncertainty. I think you're essentially just correcting for that broadly understood uncertainty, whether it's an IPCC model you're borrowing from, or some publicly available, generally accepted ocean model for that region. What you're doing is you're saying we're still going to go take direct measurements. That's very much part of our process. It's part of our regulatory steps to ensure that we're not changing, like we're not breaking TSS or pH limits. We're not doing anything that would harm the ocean in any other way. And part of taking those measurements means that you're gathering data that can reduce the uncertainty in that publicly available model. And you're saying, are these two things in agreement? And that's, I think, where a lot of the work lies in getting people to trust that the models are always going to be wrong, but there is still it doesn't mean that they're not useful. Yeah. Like there's always going to be some degree of uncertainty. It doesn't mean they're not useful. It doesn't mean we can't use them to make a strong determination and with a tremendous amount of certainty that is carbon that's being removed. Does that make sense?
It does. I was thinking about a meme. I feel like I was watching something recently where like someone signed up to do like an art class and they were excited about seeing like naked women like that they would draw, and then the model came in and it was a large hairy man and they were very disappointed. It was just like the model you think you're getting.
Ross, I just appreciate the brain that you have going on right now. You're just
I just came for like an hour. Yeah, I was just working on it. So like my brain is just like, how is this funny? How can it be funny? And that is not really what we're trying to do here. So I should probably get back on track to talking about serious science.
This is your hour. I'm happy to take this wherever you want to go.
my hour here. Yeah, I'm gonna abuse you by dragging you through my neurotic, insane
Well, I
mind.
mean, the other day I was listening to you for like an hour and a half about what was the last episode you did around the Lord of the Rings, the Tolkien story. And
Oh,
I was leveling a floor in my basement while listening to it. And I was like, this is an adventure. I'm loving this.
oh, thanks. Yeah, I appreciate you going on that journey with me. I feel like those are the kinds of shows that I know it's like so polarized, where the shows are either kind of like this or some of the other ones that I have coming out soon, or like are meant to balance it in a way. It's like cool, super nerdy inside baseball, climate tech, carbon removal shows about stuff that is extremely pertinent to this, and then also it's like here's some weird like maybe you need to know this too. Maybe I don't know.
I love those episodes. Those are some of my favorites where, it's a lot of smart people in the industry. And I love the industry for that reason of like, they care deeply and they're smart. But once you get to know their eccentricities and sort of like, the different places their brain goes and how they make up these ideas, that's where you get a real appreciation for the human beings in it.
Thanks. Yeah, I like that too. And I am trying to make more and more space for some realness, both on the podcast and then also, are you going to go to Carbon Unbound in New York?
I haven't got plans yet, but yeah, I mean, if there's a good reason to, if we can hang out, I'd love to.
You should pitch it. I want to go primarily just to hang out with Ross. Is that okay? Can I expense that? Yeah.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. But the one in Vancouver, I put on a couple of campfire sessions that were these small round tables that it was about founder grief and just some of the big feelings that come from trying to commercialize science that's just inherently difficult. And especially with big policy changes in the world being less supportive in so many ways in the last year, I feel like people have to project a lot of strength in public and they don't always feel that way in private. And it was nice to offer a space where it's like, okay, it's cool to just be real about this. And as much as it's difficult, how do I want to say this? Parts of not having a full-time job are difficult, especially as an American. But the parts that I like is that I don't have any employer who is looking over my shoulder with shows like that being like, the hell was that Tolkien show about? That was a really, does that best represent our company's values? Is that the brand that we want to associate with us? And I can do whatever I want. So that's kind of fun.
I will say, like, the part that resonated with me is like the expressing the frustrations and challenges of getting these projects off the ground or getting these companies built. There's no two ways about it. This is incredibly hard work. And it's like just on the alkalinity piece, I know you wanted to focus on that for this episode, but it can sometimes, break you because you are trying so hard to make a project make economic sense. You're trying to get the partners to buy in and lean forward in like an earnest way and just experiment and try. And especially given how challenging the market is for everyone right now. To me, it really comes down to relationships, like how, and that's what's leading on the eccentricities and quirks of all of us. When you can find those in other people and you get them to say, yeah, you know what, I'll go pitch this a second or third time to my boss. I'll go and give the people in the lab a try to see if they can get us the samples a little faster or, do the testing on our side so you can get the results in time for it to make a difference to what you are building. Those things matter. And a lot of that's based on building a relationship from the ground up of saying, if they also care and they recognize you're trying for the right reasons, whether it's environmental or whether it's, you're just trying to demonstrate that OAE actually does have the real potential that Planetary and this team sees, then you can make it a lot further than just doing a straight up like, hey, our two companies just want to work together and this makes financial sense for everybody.
I think that stuff definitely counts for a lot. And knowing people as humans is very important. I have a friend I just spoke with the other day, and we hung out a little bit in Vancouver for Carbon Unbound. They're a buyer. And so they would, everywhere they went, they were just mobbed. And the people weren't even mobbing this person very effectively either. They would just like not say, hi, how are you? Or I'm so-and-so. And then if even sometimes they didn't even say that at all, but basically just like launched right into the elevator pitch and was trying to close right there. And it was sort of weird because a lot of the way that these deals get done, like the big buyers want to know you if you have a quality project, and you can go in the front door with a well-written RFP, and if you pass their quality metrics, you will get a chance to explain it. For a lot of the buyers who don't do these big RFP processes, then okay, it's like you probably need to find a way to schmooze, but you probably shouldn't schmooze in a way that makes them feel like they are an instrumental like step in the process and not even like a human. Like, if this person has a dog or cares about anything, like that part of the business that's more humane, I think people are desperate and rushing towards this in a way that is not even very effective. So I think it's good advice. You're saying that you should be working on relationships and adding value to their lives, not just at the moment that you're trying to desperately to close a deal with them, but also because we work in this field and it should feel better than I'm just trying to sell to you and don't care who you are or why you're here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's part of the fun for me, right? Like I wouldn't do this if it was just a grind every day. But when you get to know people on a personal level, you get to know what are their interests, what kind of sports teams they root for. Like you and I used to talk a little bit more during like the Seattle Toronto finals baseball.
Yeah, don't remind me of that. Our city was so disappointed by it. But yeah.
But those are the fun points where you actually like get to build more than just a transactional relationship. And so you get to know their kids, you get to know what their interests are, and there's something more to talk about than just the day-to-day stuff, because it at some point it is just a job, but the relationships make it fun.
How important is relationship management once you're in that process? I don't know how important it was to get the deal closed in the first place, except diligence for those big deals, I'm told, takes between a year and two in many cases. So you probably shouldn't be a schmuck to them during that process, or they might just be like more trouble than it's worth. But I imagine once you have a deal like that, it's pretty important to nurse the relationship and manage it in that way.
Yeah. So I think what my take on it is, and again, I didn't lead on the initial frontier. I was part of the due diligence process. So I got to know, Frauke and others on the team a little bit better as we were working through it, and Zeke and Dan. And what I recognize in this part is like, it's about trust. And any buyer is going to recognize that, like, there's only so much we can know in 2025 or 2026 when we were starting to write the deal about what the economics of these things was 100% going to look like. Like there's a degree of certainty that you can have, and there's the unknown. And that scaling plan, how much is it going to cost to upgrade the system? How much is it going to cost to switch to a new material? What's the efficiency of all these things going to be? And so they know that there's some risk involved. What you're doing in those, quarterly or regular conversations you're having is taking them on the journey with you and ensuring that you're being as transparent as you can be, because there's other sensitivities on the other end of like your suppliers and other things, that how you're dealing with the challenges. If you're doing things that start to erode trust, then you're coming to them in the last minute when things have changed, that's not going to set you up for future years in that contract. It's not going to set you up for maybe another contract that you want to do. It's a small industry and people are going to talk to each other. But if you approach it with, hey, this is a team effort to collaboratively problem solve, and we may need things from frontier advice, contacts, then I think we can get somewhere. Like there's this old adage, I think it's an African proverb of like, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And we really are trying to build this industry together, whether it's what you do with reversing climate change, or whether it's what we do as a supplier of Planetary, or what Frontier is trying to do as a market maker. We have to work collaboratively and just say, like, put my hand up when I think something isn't going right, and say, I don't know exactly how to do this, but I would love your advice on it.
How much continuity do you perceive between your current career and your former career as a nurse?
It's yeah. So I was a nurse for roughly 7 or 8 years. I technically still hold a license as a registered nurse, and the biggest thing that I take away from that kind of spans both is that that relationship building and humanity piece of it. I was a mental health nurse, and I worked in a few different hospitals in that capacity. And I was a unit manager for a while, so I managed a team as well where I had to learn how to work collaboratively with different disciplines. So those were a lot of carryovers.
You're like Nurse Ratchet, right?
Yeah, exactly. You got it. Yeah.
Okay.
Uniform and everything, the hat. I look good. I look damn good.
Sorry to interrupt you with such an idiotic comment, but please continue.
No, I mean, nurses are one of the most trusted professions, and that's because they invest heavily at the bedside, right? And so that aspect of it is something that carries over. I was like, how can I be a better listener and talk less in these situations? How can I repeat back what I'm hearing so that we're both on the same page about what's expected here? Those are just lessons that I find incredibly useful in my day-to-day work. And yeah, it's led me this far, and let's see how much further I can go.
Thanks for being on the show, Omar. I'm so happy we were able to help you cross over from being a listener to now a documented participant for your first podcast ever, actually.
Yes, thank you so much. I've been nervous about doing a podcast at all, but I'm glad I had a good friend to do it with.